All right, Tuesday in our live session, we use the Narrative Diamond graphic organizer. We made some notes on it. If you weren't in the Tuesday live session, I would highly recommend that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you wait on your work until you get to the live session, because some of you did too much or you didn't do it quite right. So I'm going to walk you through the process today on how to annotate for some things in this piece, and then also how to submit your narrative or your summary framework. So by now you should have read The Battle in My Backyard, which is a personal experience narrative. And as you are reading, you should have read through it once, but as we read through it again, I want to stop and mark a few things. So Clover let out a whinny of joy as I leaned forward to stroke her silky mane. It was a sweltering hot day, typical weather for South Texas in May. But Clover and I weren't going to let the heat get us down. My chestnut mare and I hadn't had much time to spend together for the past few weeks, and we were just so glad to be ambling along the dusty trail beside the warm, murky waters of the Rio Grande. So, I'm going to stop right there because I've got some clues about where they are. So I'm going to choose my highlighter up here. And I'm just going to highlight in yellow about the setting. Because I know that setting South Texas is important. I know that they're on a dusty trail near the Rio Grande. All of that is very important because it's part of the setting, okay? So I'm going to come over here and add a little comment with that little plus button, or you can right-click and add a comment, and I'm going to put something in for the setting. The setting is in yellow. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my highlights here, but the setting is yellow. It's South Texas. It's May, so it's hot. I don't know when this is other than just the summertime. I also know something about the main character, okay? The main character, I'm going to note the main character is I. So I'm going to highlight that in green, and I'm going to add a comment about character. Is first person. But right now I don't really know anything else about this narrator. I felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling that only intensified when I heard the call of my favorite bird in the whole wide world, the green jay. With brilliantly blue and green feathers, the jay looked like it belonged in a lush tropical jungle. Instead, it inhabited the same dry, flat, sagebrush plains that I did. So I'm going to add to this, and I can add to it by just replying to myself. I can also add to it by editing it, and that's what I'm going to do. It's first person. She's happy. I know that because she's content right there. On this sunny afternoon, I was dreaming of the day I'd fall in love and feeling as free as a bird myself due to the fact that I was away from the house of heavy sorrow. That's how I'd come to think of my home in the past few years. Shortly after the War of Northern Aggression broke out, my brother left home to join the cavalry, and almost instantly my mother had been stricken with melancholy. My father looked exhausted from working without Travis's help every single day and lying awake with worry every night. So even though we typically think about setting as just the time and the place, I want us to continue to think about setting as, I put those in yellow, sorry. I want you to continue to think about those as just the background. So we find out some things here about her background. What does she call her house? She calls it the house of heavy sorrow. I'm going to do setting in yellow. So even though like Texas is a setting, the house of heavy sorrow is also a setting because it tells us something about her life. We also learn about the time period that this is, the War of Northern Aggression. And you might not know the name of that, but that's what the Civil War was called by Southerners, by the Confederacy. The War of Northern Aggression, because they thought that the North, the Union, was like getting in their business. And we also find out that her brother left home to join the cavalry. And how did that make her parents feel? Sad, sorrowful. We know that because her mother had been struggling with melancholy, her father was exhausted and worried. When Travis returned home in the dark of night 2 weeks ago, it was clear that he was a changed man. While unharmed in the fighting, Travis came back from the war looking infinitely older and sadder. I couldn't help but wonder what he'd seen or done that transformed him into the young man with the wary eyes and the trembling hands he was today. But Travis was close-lipped about his whole wartime experience. I knew the good-humored boy I remembered was lurking somewhere within this quiet, haunted version of my brother and hoped he'd come back to us soon. Here we're going to learn a lot. This whole paragraph is about her brother. And it's about how he was a changed man. I'm going to highlight that in yellow too, because this is more background. So I'm going to actually go up here, and in my comments, I'm going to say setting and background. In reading class, we also call that the exposition. Okay? We're learning about the characters in her life. I'm going to highlight those yellow too, because we're finding out a lot of things about Travis. He had wary eyes. He had trembling hands. He was haunted. He was quiet and haunted. Now, haunted here doesn't mean like by a ghost. It means that there's something bothering him that he can't get rid of. Like, if you had a ghost in your house. Suddenly I felt Clover stiffen with tension beneath me. Her ears pricked up and she tossed her head nervously. I knew she'd detected danger in the air, so I scanned the horizon quickly. Horrified, I discovered the hazy silhouettes of uniformed men all around me. I knew in an instant that while I was lost in my daydreams, Clover and I had meandered our way into an encampment of Union soldiers. This is the problem. Okay? This is the problem. I'm going to highlight that in pink or purplish pink. This is the conflict. It's purple. Okay, the conflict is, where is she? She's in the South. She's a Southerner. But what has she wandered into? A whole encampment. It's not just one or two. A whole group of Union soldiers, the enemy. Okay? I'm going to add that in my comment. They're the enemy. Exclamation point. That's the conflict. My thoughts raced. What are they doing here? The war was over. General Lee had surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant more than a month ago. Why were Union soldiers camping so close to my backyard? Without warning, Clover reared up on her hind legs, and I just about fell off her back. As I struggled to calm my panicked mare, a Union soldier approached. His uniform was in tatters and his boots held together with rags. My heart beat wildly, and my first thought was that he was going to hurt me. But when he spoke, his tone was gentle. Here, we've got several places where we are seeing some tension. This is tension. And if you don't know what tension is, it's like super anxious. Okay? So I just highlighted that, and I'm going to leave a comment. This is tension building. We also call that suspense, because she thinks they're going to hurt her, and she's not quite convinced that they're not going to. Hey there, he said softly, stroking Clover's nose. There's nothing to worry about here. He turned to me. Don't mean to disturb you, miss. We're just trying to get some rest. We've been marching all night. I nodded, still stunned and trembling with fear. Clover and I galloped all the way back home at top speed. Hours later, I heard the thundering hooves of the Confederate cavalry heading to the encampment on the banks of the Rio Grande. So this is continuing that conflict, which I said was going to be purple. Like, this is more conflict. The deep, resounding boom of cannon fire rang out on the battle, and the Battle of Palmito Ranch was on. It was close enough that I could hear the rhythmic blast of gunfire and the moans of those who lay dying on the field. So now we can kind of start to see why the title of this is The Battle in Her Backyard. It's not actually her backyard, but it's so close it feels like it. All I could think of was why. The war was over. What was left to fight about? The next day, news around town was that Union soldiers had come to Texas to steal our horses, and they deserved the whooping they got the whooping they deserved. The Palmetto was being called the last battle of the Civil War. That is more conflict. My head was spinning with confusion. I found it hard to believe that the Union soldiers had instigated a battle just to steal a horse. After all, the weary, soft-spoken soldier I'd met on the banks of the Rio Grande could have easily taken Clover from me, and he hadn't. Instead, he'd been a gentleman, and he might have well been among the many Union casualties. So this is different. Her head is spinning with confusion. Why? Because this is more conflict. But here, I'm going to make it a little lighter purple. This is internal conflict. Why they were nice to her. Why did they have to die? The war is over, right? I wanted to make that just a lighter shade of purple. Well, it's still not working. Sorry. All right. Sometime later, I heard that the mission of the Union soldiers was to take back a nearby fort, which definitely sounded familiar. Hadn't Union soldiers been ordered to reclaim Fort Sumter from the Confederate rebels 4 years earlier? Could it be that the first and the last battle of the Civil War were fought for the same reason? Doesn't it seem like we should have learned our lesson? Even if I'm lucky enough to live to a ripe old age, I doubt I'll ever make sense of the battle that took place so close to my backyard. It may have been fought without much of a purpose, but it taught me to never question the horrors of war and to take every opportunity to work for peace. We take every opportunity to work for peace. This is a very rare example of that extended solution. Okay, this is the resolution, this is the theme. Okay, take opportunities to work for peace. Instead of just going in there, guns blazing, killing everyone, like these people didn't mean any harm. She knows that they didn't mean any harm because they didn't have anything. Remember back on that, the description, his uniform was in tatters, his boots were held together with rags. These soldiers had been through it all, and they were probably just looking for someone to take care, to help them, give them food, give them supplies. But instead, they got slaughtered. So this is how she comes at the theme. As you're working, you're about to go through and do this again. I don't want you to worry about the summarizing framework. You're actually going to fill that out on a Google Cloud assignment, okay? So don't worry about this right here. You're going to do it on a Google Cloud assignment in just a few minutes. All right? If you have any questions, make sure to come to email me or come into the Zoom tomorrow and just ask me, okay? Make sure I'm going to close all my comments. And I'm going to move, before I leave, I'm going to move this, go to File, Move, and I'm going to put it in my folder, okay? So it should be in your drive already, but I'm going to go put it in my folder. Now I'm going to put it in my live lesson practice. You put it in your class period folder, okay? All right, that's it.